Shalom, everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Motherland. The purpose for Exploring the Motherland is to promote the mission of Quest to Unite Africa. And you are asking, if you have not been here, what is the mission of Quest to Unite Africa? The mission of Quest Unite Africa is to promote critical infrastructure and economic development for the benefit of the diaspora in the African continent. We do this through four main pillar strategies. That would be business, medicine, cultural engagement, and technological innovation. The purpose of this show is to keep you up to date with news developments on the continent of Africa, which then supports our mission and why it is relevant for us to come together throughout the diaspora and the African continent to create mutually beneficial strategic relationships for the diaspora and the African continent as a whole. But without further ado, let me start the show. World's top cocoa producer threatens price hikes in response to U.S. tariffs. And I will always put the link in the chat. The link for the chat for the articles and the videos. And the article reads, Ivory Coast could take measures to increase the price of cocoa if tariffs proposed by U.S. President Donald Trump go into effect. Ivorian Agriculture Minister Kobinine Kouasse Adojamani, probably butchered that name, told reporters in the country's capital of Abidjan on Thursday that the government wants Washington to reconsider the tariffs. When you tax our product that we export to your country, we will increase the price of cocoa. And that will have a repercussion on the price to the consumer. Kouasse said, it's the end consumer who will be harmed, which we all see that here, as we are impending price increases on everything. While global markets determine cocoa prices, the country might impose higher export taxes in order to increase revenue, potentially raising chocolate prices, which is obviously the smart way to combat a tariff, because if a country is going to impose a tariff on your export, the only way to make it economically advantageous for you is to raise the prices. And I'll put the videos in the link for the videos in the chat as well.
The world's largest cocoa producer, Ivory Coast, is threatening to make cocoa more expensive in response to proposed U.S. tariff. Ivory Coast is the powerhouse of the global cocoa industry, supplying approximately 45% of the world's cocoa beans. The country exports between 200,000 and 300,000 metric tons of cocoa to the U.S. each year. But now, the U.S. is considering tariffs that could shake up things. President Donald Trump's administration has proposed tariffs of 21% on Ivory Coast, the highest in West Africa. This is part of a broader plan to impose higher duties on dozens of countries. However, on Wednesday, April 9th, Trump announced a 90-day pause on these tariffs, giving everyone a bit of breathing room. If this tariff go into effect, the Ivory Coast Agriculture Minister Kobinine Kouasse Adjumani has warned that the country could raise export taxes on cocoa. Speaking to reporters, Kobinine Kouasse Adjumani said, when you tax our product that we export to your country, we will increase the price of cocoa, and that will have a repercussion on the price to the consumer. Kouasse also added that Ivory Coast would seek stronger ties with the European Union to ensure that if our products are not accepted in the United States, the EU can recover all of them. The US chocolate industry is particularly vulnerable to these changes. Many small businesses like Monchoco in Ivory Coast, which was planning to introduce organic chocolate bars into the US stores, now fear that the tariffs will harm their business. This could lead to job losses and higher prices for consumers. If the tariffs do go through, it could also lead to significant shift in global cocoa supply chains. West African suppliers might start prioritizing trade with European Union, which offers more favorable tariffs and established supply routes. This could further isolate the US from key cocoa sources. So what do you think? Should the US go ahead with these tariffs, or is it better to find alternative solutions? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the News God for more insightful content.
The Trump administration last week announced tariffs of 21%, the highest in West Africa, on Côte d'Ivoire as part of higher targeted duties on dozens of countries. In its reaction, Ivorian Agriculture Minister Kobenan Kwasi Adjomani says the country wants Washington to reconsider the tariffs. However, the country could raise export taxes on cocoa to earn more revenue, which would make the product more expensive for consumers. Côte d'Ivoire exports between 200,000 and 300,000 metric tons of cocoa to the U.S. each year, according to data from the Coffee and Cocoa Council. And China says it will raise its tariffs on goods to 121% in the further escalation of trade war that threatens to bring exports to a halt between the world's two biggest economies. Beijing's retaliation sparked fresh market volatility, with European stocks seesawing following the announcement, while Tokyo and Seoul closed in the red. China's State Council Tariff Commission says new tariffs of 125% on U.S. goods will take effect Saturday, almost matching the staggering 145% level imposed on Chinese goods coming into America. The Chinese Finance Ministry says tariffs will not go any higher because there is no possibility of market acceptance for U.S. goods exported to China, an acknowledgement that almost no imports are possible at the new level. Beijing also posits it will file a lawsuit with the World Trade Organization over the latest round of levies announced by Trump. Meanwhile, superpowers clash. The EU says its trade chief, Maros Sefcovic, will hold talks with U.S. counterparts in Washington on Monday to resolve their own tariff parts.
The European Union is willing to find win-win outcomes, mutually beneficial deals with our American counterparts to avoid tariffs and to avoid any harmful escalation that would be damaging on both sides of the Atlantic and indeed to the global economy.
Frama Pani, NTA News.
There you have it. And again, exploring the Motherland, episode 37, the cutoff, who will fold. Basically, there's going to be African countries who may fold to these tariffs. There may be African countries that may just, use ingenuity or start something new instead of dealing with a trading partner who wants to bully them into paying tariffs. America's tariffs on imports on certain countries, especially Africa, will probably more than likely fail. Ivory Coast is the leading producer of cocoa in the world. It's either them or Ghana. It's very close. Henceforth, for the sake of economic progression and stability, they will raise prices. Furthermore, they can determine whether it is worth the hassle trading to America. There is now a reason to cut off the United States because they seek to only enrich themselves. They are not trying to do a mutually beneficial strategic partnership through business. They only want to take and basically bully people into economic poverty or economic oppression, but it's no longer in their favor. Zimbabwe compensates white farmers. And the article reads, The government of Zimbabwe has started payment of white commercial farmers who lost land during the controversial land reform program under former President Robert Mugabe. Zimbabwe's Finance, Economic Development, and Investment Promotion Minister announced that Harare had issued $307 million in treasury bonds and also dispersed $3.1 million in cash to 378 farmers during the time of the land distribution program around the year 2000. Mugabe was adamant that the program was aimed at addressing colonial era land inequities, which left vast tracts of land in the hands of a white minority after independence from British colonial rule. So basically, this president back in the early 2000s, late 90s, is doing what the government of South Africa is trying to do. He basically made an initiative to give back land to those who had their land stolen by apartheid and colonialism. But here, the current president is redoing that. I don't know why. Maybe he's folding to tariffs from the U.S. because he sees that the South Africa's ties with the U.S. are dwindling because they want to institute this land reform policy. So that's maybe a reason why he's redoing it.
Zimbabwe is paying white farmers billions for land their ancestors stole. This isn't justice. It is a slap to every African who fought for freedom. From a Pan-African perspective, those farmers should be paying us for centuries of theft, exploitation, and pain. Let us expose why Zimbabwe's leaders are still bowing to the West, betraying our liberation. In April 2025, Zimbabwe began paying $3.1 million to 378 white farmers, with $308 million more in bonds promised. For what? Land seized in the 2000s to right colonial wrongs. But rewind to the 1890s, Cecil Rhodes' men didn't buy this land. They took it with guns, killing heroes like Mbuya Nehanda. By 1980, 4,400 whites owned 51% of Zimbabwe's best soil, while millions of blacks were squeezed onto barren reserves. That wasn't ownership, that was robbery. White farmers didn't just take land, they built wealth on African sweat. The wells, fences, and barns Zimbabwe is now paying for, black hands made them, unpaid or underpaid. Their descendants don't deserve compensation. They owe reparations for stolen lives, broken communities, and erased futures. Pan-Africanism demands accountability, not payouts to colonial heirs. So why is Emmerson Mnangagwa paying to please the West? Since 2000, when Mugabe's land reforms shook their economic grip, Zimbabwe's been frozen out. Sanctions, no loans, $12 billion in debt. Mnangagwa thinks payouts will open IMF and World Bank vaults, lift sanctions, and make him the West's darling. But this is neocolonialism. Africa forced to beg, paying for its own stolen land to win crumbs from Paris club tables. This betrayal isn't just Zimbabwe's. It weakens land fights in South Africa, Namibia, everywhere colonial theft lingers. Pan-African giants like Nkrumah and Sankara warned us. Pleasing the West keeps us chained. Africans need leaders like Traore, who reject foreign scripts and build for their people. Paying white farmers tells Africa colonial crimes can be bought off, when we should demand reparation from Britain and its settlers. King, Zimbabwe, Africa, hear this. Our land isn't for sale. White farmers and their colonial backers owe us for blood, for tears, for stolen centuries. Stop pleasing the West. Demand reparations. Build for our children, not our oppressors. Rise for a Pan-African future where justice, not greed, wins.
$3 million to local white farmers who lost their land in the early 2000s. Shifting focus to Zimbabwe, the country is paying millions in compensation to white farmers whose land was forcibly seized 2 decades ago. Zimbabwe's government has announced an initial payout of $3 million to local white farmers who lost their land in the early 2000s. The farms were seized during a controversial land reform program between 2000 and 2001. Now, this is the first payment under a 2020 compensation deal between the state and the farmers. Under that agreement, Zimbabwe promised to pay $3.5 billion in total. The current payout covers 378 farms out of the 740 approved for compensation. Now, it accounts for just 1% of the $311 million allocated for the first phase. The government says that this marks a step toward honoring its obligations to compensate farmers affected by land seizures. In 2000, then President Robert Mugabe launched a radical land reform. Thousands of white farmers lost their land, which was redistributed to Black Zimbabweans. The move was meant to correct historic injustices. As at independence in 1980, most fertile land was owned by just 4,000 Black farmers. But the land reforms were often violent and aggressive. Critics say that many farms went to Mugabe's political allies, while new landholders lacked the tools and training to farm effectively. In the aftermath, agricultural production collapsed and the economy crashed. Now, Zimbabwe's relations with the West also fell apart. President Emmerson Mnangagwa, who came to power after the 2017 coup, has been trying to repair ties with the West. Zimbabwe has been isolated from the global financial system for over 2 decades. Its economy is still burdened with massive foreign debt. Earlier this year, the government also began compensating foreign investors whose land was protected under bilateral treaties. The latest compensation move also comes as neighboring South Africa faces tensions with the US. President Donald Trump accuses South Africa of seizing white-owned farms and has used it to justify cutting aid and expelling diplomats. Analysts say that Zimbabwe's payouts could help to repair Western relations and avoid international scrutiny.
Greeting you with aloha and namaste.
The Zimbabwean government initiative to pay white farmers who had stolen land taken from them is egregious. In addition, it lacks any regard for the majority of Black farmers who had their land stolen. As a result, this will lead to cultural tension in Zimbabwe. The citizens of Zimbabwe will clearly see that the president is trying to appease other nations instead of making initiatives that help the majority of the country economically progress. So again, who will fold the cutoff? Because Zimbabwe is afraid of losing its trinkets from the US as a trading partner, whatever that might be, underhand deals. It really doesn't matter. They are folding. Zimbabwe to scrap tariffs on US goods as it faced 18% Trump levy. And I'll put the link in the chat. And the article reads, Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa, there you go, on Saturday said he will suspend all tariffs on goods imported from the United States. His announcement came days after U.S. President Donald Trump imposed an 18% duty on Zimbabwean exports to his country. In a statement on social media platform X, Mnangagwa described the measure as an attempt to build a mutually beneficial and positive relationship with the Trump administration. This measure is intended to facilitate the expansion of American imports within the Zimbabwean market, while simultaneously promoting growth of Zimbabwean exports destined for the United States, Mnangagwa said on X.
are sending a clear signal, not just to the US, but to the whole world, that Zimbabwe is open for business.
Economic analyst Prosper Chitambara says Zimbabwe's decision on Saturday to suspend tariffs on U.S. imported goods was a sign of goodwill. The announcement came after U.S. President Donald Trump imposed an 18% duty on Zimbabwean exports to his country. Trade between the two countries was around $111 million in 2024, according to U.S. government data. Chitambara said Zimbabwe's move may have been about more than trade.
So I think it's very strategic in the sense that, number one, it's going to promote trade and economic relations with the U.S. government, but not just trade and economic relations, but also even political relations.
Relations between the two countries have been strained due to Zimbabwe's poor human rights laws and its controversial land policy that was adopted 25 years ago.
Yeah, open up trade economically and political relations at the expense of the whole most of the population. That doesn't really sound too smart and mutually beneficial. So, unfortunately, some of our brothers and sisters still are under that hypnosis, but we see that there is a big enough change through the Alliance of Sahel states in West Africa to whereas some will change their mind about what they've been taught and will adjust. That's all we can hope for, but we already see it happening. And I don't know why that is a thumbnail. Sorry about that.
Again, when I feel like I'm within my right, should I fold under pressure just because me being within my right takes away all the benefit that I have? Or should I just accept the benefit and forfeit my right? Practically, if a little girl lived in the house of her uncle, who's not a nice uncle, and the uncle happens to be abusive, her uncle kept her because her mom was unalive when she was young. In other words, should a young boy remain in the uncle's house even if he abuses him because his parents passed away whilst he was still very young and he has nowhere else to go? Even though the uncle pays his school fees and gives him food, he's still very abusive as a human being. Should he remain in a house and he's 17 years old, or should he go somewhere else, far away, to other family members looking for other opportunity? Should he forfeit his right just because by having his right within his hand, he will be forfeiting the comfort of having a nice house, of going to school in a nice car, and having food 3 times a day? Fellas, what's up everybody? I hope you're doing good. It's a beautiful day. Thank you very much for stopping by. Let's jump into this.
And now, the same gratitude what
You know, Zimbabwe is not a South African province. Can we agree about that?
The police and the army defeat people. Allow me to reaffirm that Zimbabwe is actually open for business.
Zimbabwe has announced something that has shocked many people. Okay, many people are shocked. The Zimbabwean government has announced that they're going to be starting to pay the initial installment for the $3.5 billion planned to pay white farmers that lost farms in Zimbabwe. In other words, Zimbabwe has started paying white people who saw their lands taken back by the Zimbabwean government in order to reestablish some sort of friendship with the West. The first payment to be made under the 2020 compensation agreement signed between the state and the local farmers, in which Zimbabwe committed to pay $3.5 billion in farmland. Thousands of white farmers were forced from their lands, often violently, between 2000 and 2001. So let me give you context. Basically, Zimbabwe is going to pay money to white people who owned land in Zimbabwe many years ago. How did they get the land? White people came to Africa as colonialists, as you know, in many African countries. Here's Zimbabwe. It's a nice place. Not as nice as it used to be. Not at all. I'm sorry, Zimbabwe is not the place I will ask you to go visit as a foreigner for the very first time in Africa. I don't think that's where you want to go, okay? You want to go to other places. Maybe you can go to Zimbabwe as an ad-up. And my Zimbabwean brothers understand why. Because life is not easy. Okay, Zimbabwe was colonized by the British. Like many other African countries, Kenya, Uganda, South Africa a little bit, and some other places, Zimbabwe saw a surge of white farmers in the land. These white farmers worked the land, they produced good, potato, tomato, you name it, they did it. The cows, the milk, the butter, they did it. Zimbabweans, black people were just consumers and workers in this farm. Now, the white people controlled the majority of the economy of the country as a colony of Britain. Fast forward, Robert Mugabe comes into power. He feels that his people did not own anything in their own land. The majority of the lands were owned by white farmers. So he said, let me try to do something different. Maybe find a way to empower my people. How about I get the land back from these people? Because they didn't pay for it.
They occupied the land illegally. They seized the land from our people. Look, and therefore, the process of reform, land reform, involved their having to hand over the land. We agreed upon this with the British, by the way.
Some 80% of that land was acquired after you took office, some of the farmland, and with the various certificates that mean government approval. Why are these people being hounded out of the country? Why are they being hounded?
Because they don't belong there. They don't belong there. They don't belong there. They took the land. They're invaders, intruders. I'm sorry. I just had to say that. It's just so annoying. These people gaslight you. And you know who I mean by those people. But this man elegantly responded to that ignorance.
Their land then?
No, they're not being hounded out of the country at all. Those who are in industry, in manufacturing, in mining are not being...
The farmers I'm talking about. Why is that wonderful farmland and why are they being...
What are you talking about? We are getting land from them and that's all. They're not being hounded out of the country. Not at all.
They're being hounded off their land?
Not of their land.
It's not theirs.
Our land.
White farmers in Zimbabwe felt that they should be compensated for the land they owned. And Zimbabwean says, we shouldn't do that because your forefathers, when they came here, they didn't pay my forefather before they took the land. They took it by force, sometimes by knife, by guns, by stamp-hold. There's no way we're giving you money for the land that belongs to us. So obviously there was a lot of warnings on Robert Mugabe, whose goal was solely, or at least initially, to empower black people by giving them land. Because you cannot pretend to be an owner of a space if you don't own land. Now, the land reform did not happen in the smoothest way. In many instances, many white people were beaten up, were thrown out of the land, and it was very bad. Some of the white people crossed into South Africa to continue working. Some went into Zambia and other places. Now, shortly after that, Mugabe took the land and gave to black people to run. Unfortunately, many of the blacks did not have enough experience to run these farms. Yes, the idea was good to empower brothers, to help them grow in their own lands. However, many were not prepared. I mean, if in greatness, you get prepared for it. Even in order for you to be a good thief, you need to be smart. So you can't just take something from somebody who's worked hundreds of years for it. Give it to someone who's never done, doesn't have the experience to run it smoothly. Unfortunately, it failed in many instances. Number two, Zimbabwe was subjected to many sanctions from the West. Obviously, Western nations don't leave white people into suffering. Absolutely not. They hit Zimbabwe with numerous sanctions. Zimbabwe was cut off SWIFT. SWIFT is the system that allows countries to trade with other countries. It's the banking system that allows you to send money from one place to the other. If you have no access to SWIFT, you cannot send money. The reason why you can send money to your sister in the village is because of SWIFT from your phone. If you had no access to SWIFT, you would have to jump into the flight, go to the village physically and give him the cash. Western nations said the reason why they sanctioned Zimbabwe is because of Mugabe and some of his corrupt government members. But unfortunately, the question is, if you sanction Zimbabwe by disallowing the country from importing food and other things, who do you think you're making suffer for real? Not Mugabe, because he's a billionaire, he's got money and everything. You're making the people suffer. Now, how do you think you punish the president by making the people suffer? Matter of fact, it came a day where in order to buy a piece of bread in Zimbabwe, you needed so much money. Look at that. That is Zimbabwean dollars. That's the money you needed, so much money to go buy a piece of bread. Crazy. Zimbabwe went into a very difficult time where the Zimbabweans started using US dollars as currency in order to survive. Now, fast forward, Robert Mugabe passed away. And the reason why they sanctioned Zimbabwe was supposedly because of Robert Mugabe. After he passed away, the sanctions were not lifted. Later on, after many pleas, the sanctions against Zimbabwe were lifted, but they kept some sanctions against several entities. And these were major entities that still managed the country. So, in other words, the sanctions were not cleared. So Zimbabwe still go through a very difficult time. And the majority of Zimbabweans, a lot of them at least, cross into South Africa looking for a better life. And obviously, when you go into South Africa looking for a better life, you need to work, you need job. And when you take those very little job, like simple job, like security guard, gardener, you want to get the cheapest price so you can get the market. And by doing that, you're killing the opportunities for the Black South Africans that didn't get a chance to go to university. They want to be paid adequately. And you're going to the country and asking for cheaper. And that's created tension between the two countries. Now, Mugabe does not exist anymore. He's gone. But Zimbabwe is still under sanctions. There was a moment where Edson Mnangagwa turned into Russia because he said, I need to diversify my means. I cannot look into the West because I feel like the West is just not fair. They're just trying to step over everybody. Zimbabwe even received helicopters and many other gifts from Russia. Many people felt like at least an African country is resisting to the pressure of the West. Now, 360, Mnangagwa now says he wants to pay the farmers, even though the land belongs to Zimbabwe. But what he's saying is that he's not paying for the land. He's only paying for the changes made on the land. The improvements made on the land will be paid for, not the land. But the amount is $3.5 billion. Is that amount for improvement? Question mark. Mnangagwa is trying to please the West. That is obvious. Just a few days ago, he said America's good can come into Zimbabwe tax-free, tariff-free. And this happens after Donald Trump put 18% tax on Zimbabwe. So as opposed to many other countries that have applied reciprocity against America whenever they applied tax, Zimbabwe actually said, you know what, you guys can come here for free. We don't have to. Let me know how you feel about this. It was a great pleasure. This is crazy. Is this right? Can you forfeit your right just because you're scared? God bless.
No, it's absolutely not. And if you haven't checked out his channel, Zach, I forgot what its last name is, but you can just type in Africa Zach. He basically put a lot of history and concisely basically illustrated what's going on in Zimbabwe. Again, this is not a smart, strategic, beneficial move for the whole population of Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe needs to restructure its strategic economic development plan instead of appeasing America and the West. More so America, a country on the decline economically and diplomatically. Seek trade with other African nations and form strategic partnerships. However, we see that they are choosing to fold to Western colonial pressure, so nothing changes until they understand that. But again, there is hope. We see other African nations, again, like the Alliance of Sahel states, taking that charge and changing their viewpoints and realizing that doing partnerships with the West is a trap and no longer is mutually beneficial to them. In fact, it hinders their progress. In this next article, Ghana orders foreigners to exit gold market by April 30th. See, like I said, there is still hope because other nations are waking up and are not folding and are making demands that can benefit them, and they are not folding. And I'll put the article in the chat. And the article reads, Ghana has ordered foreigners to exit its gold trading market by the end of the month, a new government body said on Monday, as the West African country looks to streamline gold purchases from small-scale miners, increase earnings, and reduce smuggling. Africa's leading gold producer is shifting away from a system in which local and foreign companies with export licenses can buy and export gold from artisanal or small-scale mining. Under the new system, the newly created gold board known as Gold Bod is the only entity allowed to buy, sell, assay, and export artisanal gold. An older license have ceased to be valid. Foreigners must leave the local gold trading market by April 30th, although they can apply to buy or take off gold directly from the gold bod. And again, this is smart because as gold, we all know the price of gold is rising. If you've looked at past shows, there's a lot of illegal mining amongst the foreigners. More so, the locals do it because they are desperate, more so. But the foreigners do it because they want to get gold so they don't have to pay taxes on the gold. Therefore, they can make ridiculous profit on the gold, basically marking it up almost 200% or more without having to pay taxes. And then that it hurts. Then in that case, that hurts that nation that they're looting the gold from.
I'm Troy Beverly, and this is Pan-African News. Ghana. Ghana excludes foreigners from trading gold under new law. On Monday, April 14th, 2025, the Ghana Gold Board, Gold Bod, ordered foreign gold traders to cease operations in the country as of May 1st in compliance with the recently passed Ghana Gold Board Act 2025, which allows only Gold Bod to buy, sell, assay, and export gold produced by licensed small-scale and artisanal miners. As reported by Asase Radio, the newly established Gold Bod has also terminated all licenses issued by the Precious Minerals Marketing Company, PMMC, to Ghanaians and foreigners effective May 1st, instructing Ghanaians desiring to remain or enter the gold trade in the country to apply for a new license from Gold Bod beginning on April 22nd. Current licensed gold traders can continue operations until April 30th, but must trade in the national currency, the cedi. According to MyJoy Online, foreigners may purchase gold directly from Gold Bod under the new law. Foreign large-scale companies are not affected by the new law. The administration of newly re-elected President John Mahama wants to streamline the purchase of gold from small-scale and artisanal miners to increase earnings and reduce smuggling. Without specifying the punishment, Gold Bod warned that engaging in gold trading in Ghana without a new license after April 30th will be punishable under Act 1140. As mentioned by Reuters, Ghana's gold exports increased by 53.2% in 2024 to $11.64 billion, with nearly $5 billion of it being generated by legal, small-scale, and artisanal miners.
And our last story takes us to Ghana. The African nation has announced a significant policy shift concerning its gold sector. Ghana has given all foreign companies until the 30th of April to exit its small-scale gold market. Foreigners will neither be allowed to buy gold from miners, nor will they be allowed to export the commodity. This was announced by a new government body on Monday. Now, the newly created body is called the Gold Bod, and it will now be regulating all of the gold trade, from buying, selling, to exporting gold. Now, this agency will be the only gateway of Africa's leading gold producer. For years, Ghana has struggled with illegal gold mining, and it's part of the government's effort to streamline the practice through the formation of this gold bar. The government is trying to seal the loopholes. Now it wants to tighten control over this shiny metal on which the livelihoods of at least 1 million people are dependent. The ban on gold trading takes effect on the 1st of May. However, they can apply to the body for permissions. Now, Ghana's gold exports rose significantly in 2024. It grew over 50% and reached more than $11 billion last year. $5 billion came from legal small-scale miners. A portion of the remaining likely comes from illegal mining, making its way to the supply chain without proper licenses. It's believed that Ghana can earn more if gold went through the official channels. Illegal mining is also known as galamsey in the country, and many Chinese nationals have been heavily a part of this malpractice. Many unemployed youth have also joined the illegal mining. They see it as one of the few ways to earn money fast.
The main reason the government has failed to stop illegal mining is joblessness and unemployment in the country. For example, I am getting older, and if I am jobless and they tell me about a dirty job that will make more money than I expected, because I am unemployed, I'll take it. If someone advised me to stop the job because it's destroying bodies of water, and I stop, if I don't have another job that will make me money, I will definitely return to the illegal mining.
So it's a dangerous mix.
You see, I understand that point, but at the same time, there has to be some type of sacrifice if you want the future generation to have jobs and have markets and revenue or access to economic progression. You know, seeking your own will over the benefit of the whole country isn't really outlook that is promising for the future for those. I understand that, like I said, the locals do it out of desperation, but you have to, you know, allow the government to create something that allows stability to bring back money for the whole country as a whole, so they can help support different infrastructure and initiatives that can help you, maybe not in his time, but the future generations' time, access to jobs and other things that they may have not been able to have because of illegal mining on a whole scale. But like I said, it's the foreigners who've caused this imbalance in the first place.
So foreign financiers and machinery, local youth desperate for income, and a weak system. Together, these fuel an underground gold economy. Ghana is Africa's leading gold producer, and in the world, it ranks 6th. Now, what matters here has ripple effects on global markets. Recently, Ghana's government announced that foreign nationals involved in illegal mining will be deported. The formation of the regulatory body is the first step to Ghana's wider plan to clean up the gold industry. By setting a state-backed body, the government is laying the groundwork for more reforms.
Greeting you with aloha and namaste.
This is a calculated business initiative to help stimulate economic growth. Furthermore, it also helps set a cultural standard that illegal mining will not be tolerated. In addition, it conveys that unethical mining practices will no longer be tolerated by foreigners and locals. As gold becomes a valuable commodity daily, I'm pretty sure gold is almost at it's at over 3,000, but I believe it climbed to $3,300 per ounce. Ghana is proactive in helping make a new standard to help successfully capitalize on their own resources. Again, we see a trend of African countries like Ghana, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali seeking to take control of their own resources so they can economically progress. That is literally something that all the African countries need to understand. You can't squander away your only resources for pennies on the dollars or Western influence or appeasement. And again, I understand like that individual said he doesn't have a job right now, and illegal mining helps him get over for the time being, but he has to understand that short-term gain isn't always the greatest, because again, it is destroying the country, destroying the country's agriculture. And again, the agriculture is dependent on so many things, and that's how the country makes money. And if you continue to legally mine, then you're going to lose the cocoa crop, because the water bodies are toxic and the cocoa crop won't be able to grow as well. So it all coincides. Africa fights back. Namibia's visa reforms target U.S. citizens. Article in the chat, excuse me. And article reads, in a bold move to promote reciprocity, there you go, and fairness in international travel, Namibia's government has announced visa reform measures targeting U.S. citizens. This decision comes as a response to the stringent visa requirements imposed on Africans traveling to the United States. The new policy requires Americans to obtain visas before entering Namibia, a significant shift from the previous visa-free arrangement. Over 500 Americans are set for deportation if they fail to comply with the new regulations. Namibia's president emphasized the need for reciprocity, stating, if Africans need visas to enter the U.S., then Americans must also need visas to enter Namibia. This stance has sparked a global debate on visa policies and international relations. The visa reform is part of Namibia's broader initiative to make the country visa-free for all African nations. This moves to aim to promote intra-African travel, trade, and cooperation, fostering a sense of unity and solidarity among African countries. Again, that is the way to go.
Namibia's new president, Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah, is sending shockwaves again, leaving the Western leaders shaking and panicking. Like a blazing comet, she has burst onto the global stage, joining the ranks of fearless Pan-Africanist leaders like Burkina Faso's Captain Ibrahim Traoré. With a steely resolve and a heart burning for justice, President Nandi-Ndaitwah has unleashed a series of audacious policies that have left the world stunned. From deporting over 500 American nationals without visas to championing visa-free travel for Africans, restructuring the oil and gas sector, and demanding an apology from Germany for the Namibian genocide, she's not just leading Namibia, she's rewriting the rules of African sovereignty. This is no ordinary presidency. This is a clarion call for dignity, unity, and progress. President Nandi-Ndaitwah isn't smiling, and neither should those who underestimate her vision for a liberated Africa. Let's start with the bombshell that's got tongues wagging from Windhoek to Washington. Over 500 American nationals are facing deportation from Namibia for flouting immigration laws. You heard that right. Namibia is sending a clear message to the world: no visa, no stay. In a fiery declaration that reverberated across borders, President Nandi-Ndaitwah laid down the law. If Africans need visas to enter the US, then Americans must also need visas to enter Namibia. This isn't just a policy shift. It's a seismic stand for reciprocity and respect in international relations. For too long, African nations have been subjected to humiliating visa requirements by Western powers, while their citizens waltz into our lands with impunity. Not anymore. President Nandi-Ndaitwah has drawn a line in the sand, asserting Namibia's dignity and demanding fairness on the global stage. Government sources confirm that the deportation targets are clear. Americans who've overstayed their welcome or entered Namibia without proper documentation are in the crosshairs. Immigration officials have hit the ground running, serving deportation notices with precision and purpose. Law enforcement agencies are working hand in hand to ensure the process is lawful, orderly, and respectful of human rights. Because Namibia isn't about chaos, it's about justice. This bold move isn't an act of aggression, but a powerful statement of principle. President Nandi Ndaitwah has made it crystal clear. Namibia will no longer be a playground for those who disregard its laws. And for Africans who've endured endless queues and rejections at foreign embassies, this is a moment to stand tall. Our continent is rising and Namibia is leading the charge. But President Nandi Ndaitwah isn't stopping there. In a parallel announcement that set hearts ablaze with Pan-African pride, she's pushing for visa-free entry for citizens of all African nations. Yes, you read that correctly. Namibia is throwing open its doors to its African brothers and sisters, tearing down the colonial borders that have divided us for centuries. This isn't just about travel. It's about unity, trade, and collective progress. Imagine a continent where Africans move freely, share ideas, build businesses, and strengthen bonds without the shackles of visas. President Nandi Ndaitwah envisions an Africa where no citizen is treated as a foreigner on their own soil, and she's turning that vision into reality. This policy is a love letter to the continent, a pledge to foster intra-African solidarity and smash the barriers that have kept us apart. From Lagos to Nairobi, Accra to Addis Ababa, the message is resounding. Africa is one, and Namibia is paving the way. Now, let's talk about the economic revolution brewing in Namibia's oil and gas sector. Just like Captain Ibrahim Traoré, who's shaking up Burkina Faso with fearless reforms, President Nandi Ndaitwah is taking no prisoners when it comes to securing Namibia's wealth for its people. In a masterstroke of leadership, she's placed the country's burgeoning oil and gas industry under direct presidential oversight. Why? Because Namibia's resources belong to Namibians, not foreign corporations or corrupt elites. With international giants like Total Energies and Shell sniffing around since their initial finds in 2022, the stakes are sky high. While some discoveries have been deemed non-commercial, the potential for oil production is a game changer for this sparsely populated nation of 3 million. President Nandi Ndaitwah isn't naive. She knows the world is watching, and she's determined to ensure every drop of oil benefits her people. This restructuring isn't just about efficiency, it's about accountability. By bringing the sector under her direct control, President Nandi Ndaitwah is sending a loud message. There'll be no shady deals or backroom betrayals on her watch. She's promised transparency, adherence to Namibian laws, and responsible management of revenues. This is Pan-Africanism in action, taking ownership of our resources and using them to uplift our people. Just as Captain Traoré has rallied Burkinabés to reclaim their destiny, President Nandi Ndaitwah is mobilizing Namibians to harness their natural wealth for schools, hospitals, and jobs. The oil and gas sector is no longer a free-for-all. It's a national treasure, and she's guarding it with the ferocity of a lioness. And then there's the matter of historical justice. President Nandi Ndaitwah has turned her gaze to the scars of the past, demanding that Germany face its atrocities head-on. The Namibian genocide of 1904 to 1908, where tens of thousands of Herero and...
I'll let you look at the rest of the video, but again, the right to do trade and to have travel amongst African nations is the way to go, and that's how you progress economically. African money going through African countries, African trade. That's how you strengthen nations within the borders of Africa. And again, this I wouldn't necessarily say it's tit for tat. It's just smarter to not have to rely on countries who are bullying you into their own agenda, so to speak, because the US thinks it's going to bully Namibia, but they're saying, no, we don't really need you, and we're going to make it harder for you to come into our country because you don't seek to have any reasonable diplomatic discourse or relations. These African countries' passport holders are in trouble.
The US will revoke visas of all people, tourists, students, workers that dare to say something negative about Donald Trump policy. And this is under the umbrella of threats to national security. So in other words, if you have a US visa and you dare say something that goes against America's policy or international policy, you can see your visa revoked and thrown out, thrown to jail if you don't go back to your country. What's up, everybody? I hope you're doing good. It's a beautiful day. No, it's not really a beautiful day when it comes to what's happening in the world, but thank you very much for stopping by. We appreciate you here. You want to know about the Motherland, Africa, you're at the right place. Here we talk about most of the things. Everything that goes straight into us, we're going to talk about it. And I think this is a very important subject that we need to touch. Okay. So the US will deny visa, residence permit over social media post. Okay. This is crazy. Over social media posts. So the policy will take effect immediately and apply to student visas and requests for permanent resident green card to stay in the United States of America. So the country that we all know as the land of the free, what is it? The land of the free? What? Yeah, where everybody has a right to speech. Anyway, where you have free speech in the United States of America and the right to protest. Is this free speech and right to protest slowly being cancelled? Okay, well, hundreds of visas have been revoked by the Trump administration right now. As we speak, hundreds of visas, 300 visas per day have been revoked. This includes tourist visa, student visa, green card holders. Imagine, it takes time to get your green card, and years, and work, and patience, and investment. You've worked so hard for many years to acquire your green card and settled in the United States of America, just to be told that it has been cancelled. Over what? Over a social media post. So the Trump administration is basically going to use AI to scan what you talk about on social media. So if you want to go to the United States of America right now and you want to apply for a visa, you need to make sure your social media talks about memes and cartoons and lotteries and concerts and music. Don't talk about politics, because you could be flagged as a threat to national security. There is a comprehensive list, fellas, that you can see it online. They're basically going to scrutinize social media of all visa applicants. All posts that are anti-Trump or anti-Semitic are going to be flagged. But, well, there is no definition of what is anti-Trump or what is anti-Semitic. So that's going to be to the discretion of whoever chooses to describe your post as they want. So far, many visas of students have been revoked. So if you stood in the street in the United States of America and saying, please save the young child in Gaza, or save the young child, the woman, and the elderly people that have not absolutely nothing wrong, you could be supporting the people they don't like. You know, they start with H, ha. I can't say the name because we get flagged. So if you went to the street saying, please allow those people in that land to just have water, to just have some food, you could be described as anti-Semitic and supporter of Ham. And I think if you live in a just world, you cannot suggest that everybody in that space of land is Ham. No. There are children who are not Ham, who are being unalived. There are women who are not Ham, that are pregnant and living through difficulties. There are elderly people who have nothing to do with that. Don't they deserve a level of consideration because they are human beings as well, or are they not human beings? In other words, what they've done to South Africa at a national level is going to be done to human beings and visa applicants on a personal level. What they're going to do is, if they revoke your visa for making a social media post, and this reminds me of a country we're going to talk about this just now, China's Communist Party. You know, Americans are amazing. I love America. You must learn from America when it comes to marketing and your reputation. They do a tremendous job. You look at all the movies they've been made many, many years ago. We all love these movies, Hollywood movies, amazing movies, you know, amazing movies, Hollywood movies in Vietnam, you know, in Russia. And most of the time, Americans are the good people and the Russians, the Vietnamese are the bad people. Well, until you learn history, it doesn't necessarily mean Americans were the bad people. It just means that was Vietnam. That America didn't have to go to Vietnam because that's their land. We love that, and we all grew up watching that. But from now on, if your post is defined as anti-Semitic, your visa will be cancelled if you live in the United States of America. Marco Rubio say, yes, there is freedom of speech, but foreigners do not have the rights as Americans. And this is the very first time I hear something like this. Doesn't this feel to you like they are first-grade citizen and second-grade citizen? I mean, if you are legitimately in a country, you have not breached any law, you're not a prisoner. I can understand in some countries, prisoners that breach the law, they lose their right. But you haven't done anything wrong. You are legal. You're paying tax if you have to pay tax. But you don't have the same right as the citizen. And we're talking about what's right, rights to speak. You can't speak. Doesn't that sound sort of, I don't know. This policy will take effect immediately and apply to student visa and requests for permanent residence. Now, if they cancel your visa, okay, they cancel your visa, you have to leave the country. And for each day you don't leave the country, you're going to be charged $998. That's about $1,000 per day. So we revoke your visa for making a post saying, please, you must feed those people that stay in that side of the world because they've been suffering. You know, please, this policy is not okay. Or please don't put 50% on this route. You're just trying to find a way to survive. You could be considered as anti-Trump and anti-American. So you're going to see your visa revoked and you're going to be forced to pay $1,000 a day until you leave. And if you don't leave after a certain amount of day, you're going to be jailed. This is the land of the free, the greatest land in the world, United States of America. Now, this is very sad because some of us really started believing this, that America really is the land of the free, where people could say whatever they want. A lot of people wanted to leave their shittle countries because they felt like in America, you can express yourself. You know, there's freedom of speech, at least. Well, this reminds me of something that many people used to blame China of. They used to say that in China, you can't speak your mind, you know. If you speak your mind, they check your social media. If you speak your mind, you are going to be punished for it. Oh, China actually have a rating system where you get points for being a good citizen. And being a good citizen means praising the Chinese government, praising the Chinese National Party. If you don't do so, then your points go down. You need to earn some points to be a legitimate citizen. In China, they say there are cameras everywhere that scans you. They scan your work, your ups, your down, scans everything. Surveillance system, unbearable life, they say about China. Well, in China, if you don't have enough points, you can't travel from one city to the other. You need to behave accordingly. So watch your social post. If you have enough points, then you can travel to see your auntie to the next city. Well, if you don't have enough points because you say something negative about the policies of China, then you will not be allowed to go to the next city and visit your mother, even if she's sick or dying. You can't. Well, very slowly, doesn't this beginning to sound like a little bit like China? Just saying out there. I mean, if you can't say anything, it's not, you know, it's not like you're breaking the street or you're breaking a mall or you're setting fire or you marching and looting and you're not doing anything. You're just expressing yourself. So you can't express yourself anymore. How do you say you live in a democracy if you can't even speak your mind? Because democracy should be about putting ideas together, okay, and trickling ideas, and from that comes the truth. From that comes enlightenment. You need to have your opposing ideas for you to get enlightenment. You're gonna get enlightenment with one way of thinking. It doesn't work. I think somebody intelligent once said, as much as I don't agree with you, I will, with my life, defend your right to express yourself. That is equality. That is acceptance. That is freedom. That is what is just, even in the eyes of God, allowing somebody to express themselves without necessarily having to hurt anybody else. So from now on, if you say something, if you use your brain to think about a social situation, you could be identified as an anti-Trump, anti-American. Therefore, you will not get a visa. But anyway, I think people should also learn to love their own countries. Learn to love your own countries. I think this is a great opportunity for the entire world to learn to develop themselves, you know, to learn to be independent, to learn to work with their neighbors, you know, to learn not to put all your eggs in one basket. This is a great opportunity for the world to understand that you cannot hope that America will come and save your country, because that is not America's duty. America's duty is...
All right, you can watch the rest of the video. So basically, Namibia is within its rights, and they are basically doing what is needed, because if there is going to be animosity against different nations from America, then they need to readjust and recalibrate their own diplomatic affairs and you know, come together within Africa to start doing things that allow them all to be self-reliant and promote sovereignty.
As the United States builds strategic ties with...
And this is the last video, and this basically happened this morning, so I'm learning it as you are.
Some African nations, it's also considering degrading relations with several others. Since Donald Trump's return to the White House, Africa has once again been hit by a series of hardline policies, from travel bans and visa restrictions to aid cuts and trade tariffs. The continent is facing headwinds, and now Washington is planning to reduce its diplomatic footprint in Africa drastically. New reports reveal that the Trump administration is considering closing nearly 30 U.S. embassies and consulates worldwide. Many of them are located in Africa. Now, the move is part of a sweeping shakeup at the State Department, driven by the Elon Musk-backed Department of Government Efficiency, with a focus on shrinking federal operations. The U.S. is looking to shut down 10 embassies and 17 consulates across Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean. In Africa, embassy closures are being considered in Eritrea, Gambia, Lesotho, Republic of Congo, and South Sudan. In South Africa, the U.S. could shut its consulate, while diplomatic missions in Somalia may face downsizing despite their critical role in counter-terrorism. Now, the plan is still under review and would need sign-off from Secretary of State Marco Rubio or the White House. Embassy and consulate closures are also being considered in France, Germany, and the United Kingdom. But for Africa, the impact could be far more profound. Less diplomatic presence means greater isolation on the global stage. Embassies are crucial for diplomatic engagement, development coordination, and public outreach. Shutting them down risks cutting off direct communication with governments and local communities. It could erode people-to-people ties. Now, Trump's policies have already altered U.S.-Africa relations. Many nations are facing aid withdrawals, tougher immigration rules, and deportation orders. In South Africa, diplomatic relations have soured after Trump accused the country of mistreating white farmers and committing human rights violations, a claim widely rejected by experts and officials alike. But as the U.S. pulls back, other global powers are rushing in to fill the void. China, Russia, Turkey, and the Gulf states are deepening trade, infrastructure, and defense ties across the continent. So while the U.S. steps back, Africa's geopolitical balance could shift in real time.
Greeting you with aloha and namaste.
No, I love India. Presence, occupation.
Again, as I titled this, The Cutoff Who Will Fold. I hope you all enjoyed the show and enjoy your weekend. Shabbat Shalom.